The first complaint sounded ridiculous, until it wasn't. "There's knocking, like it's coming from inside the walls," the motel manager told dispatch, voice low, like she didn't want her own words to hear her. A few minutes later, a second guest called, then a third. Same message, same room number, 12. Officer Jace Moreno pulled into the Maple Ridge Budget Inn, expecting pranksters or a loose pipe. But as he stepped out of his cruiser, the neon sign buzzed, and a muffled knock answered from somewhere behind the lobby drywall. 3 knocks, a pause, then 2 more, like whoever was inside the building already knew he'd arrived. The Maple Ridge Budget Inn wasn't the kind of place you remembered unless you had to. It sat just off the highway on a frontage road lined with fast food signs and gas stations. Most nights it held a mix of road workers, tired families breaking up long drives, and the occasional local who needed a room after an argument or a plumbing disaster at home. Officer Jace Moreno was 4 months into solo patrol, still a rookie in the eyes of older officers, but trusted enough to handle routine calls without a training officer riding shotgun. He was the type who wrote clean reports, used his manners, and didn't look for trouble. If anything, he tried to de-escalate trouble before it got bigger. That night was normal at first. A traffic stop for a busted taillight, a welfare check on an elderly resident who'd missed a medication pickup, a quick drive-by for a noise complaint that turned out to be a football game and a loud TV. Then, close to midnight, dispatch sent him to the motel. The call notes were odd, but not alarming. Multiple guests reporting knocking from inside walls. Staff states room 12 vacant. TV in room 12 reportedly flickers on when people pass. It sounded like plumbing, electrical issues, or someone squatting. It also sounded like the kind of call that turns into paperwork if you ignore it and something happens later. When Jace arrived, the manager, Holly Denton, mid-40s, hair pulled back tight like she never stopped moving, met him at the lobby door. She tried to smile, but her eyes kept tracking the hallway behind her. "Officer, I know how this sounds," she said, "but it's real. Guests are checking out. They say they hear it through the headboards, through the vents, like someone's tapping from the inside." "Room 12 is empty?" Jace asked. Holly nodded quickly. "Has been. Weeks. We keep it locked. It's not even supposed to be rented right now." "Why not?" Holly hesitated. "Just maintenance." Jace didn't press yet. He learned that people sometimes used maintenance as a blanket word for problems they didn't want to explain. Bed bugs, broken locks, unpaid bills, something they didn't want in a report. He took out his notepad and wrote down the basics. Normal, calm, professional. And then, from somewhere behind the lobby wall, he heard it himself. Knock, knock, knock. Holly's face tightened like she'd been holding her breath all night. Jace lifted his radio. "Dispatch, Unit 12 on scene. I'm going to check the room and surrounding units, requesting a second unit for safety." The motel hallway smelled like old detergent and microwaved food. Jace walked slowly, listening. Not just for knocking, but for anything that suggested a living person. Footsteps, a cough, a door chain shifting. Holly followed a few steps behind, hugging a master key ring to her chest like it was a rosary. "You said the TV turns on?" Jace asked. "Not all the way," she said. "Just flickers, like someone hits the remote. But there's nobody in there. And we shut the power off to that room at the breaker last week." Jace stopped. "You shut off the breaker?" Holly nodded. It was the easiest way to stop it. Didn't stop. That made his skin prickle. A TV without power didn't flicker. Not unless something else was wrong. They reached room 12. The door looked normal. Brown paint, metal numbers, a peephole. The kind of door you didn't think twice about. The knocking came again, quieter now. Not from the door, from the wall beside it. Jace leaned close, keeping his body angled, instincts tightening. "Maple Ridge Police," he called, firm but not aggressive. "If anyone's inside, make yourself known." Silence. Then the knocking shifted. Faint taps that moved away, like a sound traveling through studs. Jace looked down the hallway. Holly whispered, "That's what it does. Like it's moving." Jace tried the handle. Locked, as expected. Holly slid the master key into the slot with shaking fingers. The lock clicked. Jace took a breath, drew his flashlight, and opened the door. The room was colder than the hallway. Not dramatically, just enough to notice. Curtains half drawn, a thin line of highway light cutting across the carpet. The TV screen was dark, but a faint static glow pulsed across it like a heartbeat. "Anyone here?" Jace called again. No response. He did a quick safety scan. Bathroom, closet, behind the curtains. The room was empty. No luggage, no bedding disturbed, no sign of someone living there, except for the guest book. It sat on the desk like it belonged in the lobby, not a room. A thick, black, old-fashioned binder with a pen chained to it. The motel didn't use guest books anymore. Everything was digital. Holly frowned when she saw it. "That's not ours," she said. Jace stepped closer. The book was open to a page already filled. Not printed. Handwritten. He read the top line and felt his stomach tighten. 12:07 a.m. Officer Moreno arrived. Parked left of the ice machine. Jace's eyes lifted toward the window, then back to the book. 12:09 a.m. He asked about the breaker. He didn't like the answer. His throat went dry. The writing was neat, almost polite, like someone keeping notes for work. He flipped the page. 12:11 a.m. He is reading this now. The knock came again. This time from inside the room, behind the headboard. Jace stepped back, flashlight beam shaking slightly as across the wallpaper. Holly whispered, "No, no, no, no." Jace forced his voice into steadiness and grabbed his radio. "Dispatch, Unit 12. I need my backup expedited. Possible unauthorized person on site. I'm in room 12. Static answered him, thin and brief. Then dispatch came through. "Copy, Unit 12. Backup en route. ETA 2 minutes. Jace didn't look away from the wall because the guestbook pen, still chained, had begun to move. Not scribbling. Not writing. Just slowly turning, as if someone unseen had picked it up and was deciding what to say next. Backup arrived fast. Officer Talia Ruiz. Calm eyes, steady hands. The kind of presence that made a room feel safer without anyone saying it. Ruiz stepped in, took in the scene in seconds. The open guest book, Jace's rigid posture, Holly hovering like she might bolt. "What do we have?" she asked quietly. Jace didn't answer right away. He just angled the book toward her. Ruiz read the lines. Her expression didn't change much, trained discipline. But her gaze sharpened, and she looked around the room like she was remapping it. "All right," she said. "We treat it like a person is here. You and I clear again. Holly, stay in the hall. If you hear anything, don't come in. Understood?" Holly nodded so hard, her bun shook. Ruiz checked the bathroom. Jace checked the closet again. Nothing. Then Ruiz did something Jace hadn't thought of. She walked to the TV and felt behind it, fingers searching for a hidden device. A prank, a camera, a speaker, anything. "TV isn't even plugged in," Ruiz said. Jace stared. "She said the breaker's off." Ruiz crossed to the door and opened the electrical panel inside the room. Motel rooms sometimes had small sub-panels. The switches were down. The room shouldn't have been running anything, and yet the TV still pulsed with that faint static glow. Ruiz leaned over the guest book and flipped back to the first page. The handwriting continued, page after page, like a timeline, like surveillance, like someone had been waiting to narrate Jace's night. Then Jace noticed a detail that made his chest tighten. The entries weren't just describing what was happening in the room. They were describing what had happened on his patrol earlier, 10:41 p.m. He stopped the blue sedan with a broken taillight. The driver said, "I'm just trying to get home." 11:18 p.m. The old man on Birch Street didn't answer the first knock. He answered the second. Those weren't public details. Those were calls only dispatch and units should know. Ruiz looked up, eyes steady but voice lower. "Jace, did you tell anyone about those stops?" "No," Jace said, barely audible. "Just dispatch, just radio traffic." Ruiz's jaw tightened. Then someone is listening, or she didn't finish the sentence. The knocking returned, louder now. Not a random bang, not pipes, a pattern. 3 knocks, pause. 2 knocks, pause. 1 knock. Ruiz's eyes flicked to Jace. "That's deliberate." Jace swallowed hard. "Like someone trying to talk." Ruiz held up a hand for silence. In that quiet, the room felt too still, like even the air was waiting. Then, slowly, the guestbook pen moved again. This time, it wrote. Not fast, not violently, just steady, careful strokes, like a clerk filling out a form. Ruiz and Jace stood frozen as a new line appeared under the last entry. 12:14 a.m. He will leave early. 12:15 a.m. He will not drive past this exit again. Jace's pulse hammered. "That's not," he started. And then the ink faded right in front of them. The letters drained like water soaking into paper, disappearing until the page looked blank. Jace flipped back to the earlier pages. Pages filled with his night, his movements, his words. Blank. Every single one. Ruiz stared at the empty paper, then at Jace. "Okay," she said, voice controlled but tight. "We're done in here." She turned to the doorway. "Holly, call your regional manager. This room is closed until further notice. We're logging this as suspicious circumstances and possible trespass. And we're pulling any security footage you have." Holly's voice shook. "But there's nothing on the cameras." Ruiz didn't blink. "Then we document that too." Jace stepped out of room 12 like he was stepping out of deep water. The hallway felt warmer, louder, normal in a way that almost made him dizzy. Back in the parking lot, he looked at the motel's dark windows. The neon sign buzzed. Somewhere behind the drywall, the final faint knock sounded once. Soft, almost satisfied. Jace keyed his radio. "Dispatch, I'm clearing the scene." There was a beat of static before dispatch answered. And in that static, for just a second, Jace could have sworn he heard a whisper, thin and familiar, saying his last name like it had always been there. The report Jace wrote the next morning looked normal on paper, because it had to. He documented what could be documented: time of call, manager statements, officer observations, the request for backup, the condition of the room, the breaker status, the unexplained presence of an old guest book, and the lack of evidence of a physical intruder. He didn't write, "The pen moved by itself." Not like that. He wrote, "Observed guestbook entries referencing officer activity. Entries not present upon subsequent review. Possible hoax or tampering. Recommend review of surveillance footage and maintenance inspection of walls, vents." Ruiz backed him up with the same clean tone. "No signs of forced entry. No persons located. Electrical irregularities noted. Manager states room vacant weeks. They requested motel security footage. The manager produced it with shaky hands. The cameras were old, grainy, and mostly pointed at the lobby and parking lot. Room 12's hallway camera? Dead. Had been for months, Holly said, like it was a bad coincidence she'd stopped bothering to fix. Of course it's dead, Tom muttered when Jace told dispatch later. It's always dead when you need it. Maintenance came. They checked wiring. They found nothing that explained the TV flicker without power, except a loose connection in the wall that could maybe create phantom voltage under certain conditions. A maybe. A shrug. They opened the wall near room 12 to check for an animal, a squatter space, a hidden crawl. Inside were old studs, insulation, dust, and scrape marks that didn't match any tools the maintenance guy used. The motel closed room 12 anyway. They put a new lock on it. They posted a sign on the door that said, "Out of order." For a while, the knocking complaints stopped, but Jace didn't. He found himself listening to walls everywhere. At the station, in his apartment, even in the grocery store aisle, where the hum of refrigerators sounded like distant tapping. He started taking a different route on patrol. Anything that didn't pass that highway exit. At first, he told himself it was practical. Shortcuts, better coverage. Then, one night, dispatch assigned him a call on the frontage road near the motel, and he felt his hands tighten on the wheel before he even realized it. Ruiz noticed. She didn't tease him. She just said, "You don't have to prove anything. You did your job. You called backup. You documented. That's what we do." "But what was it?" Jace asked, voice low. Ruiz looked forward through the windshield like the answer might be hiding in the dark. "Sometimes," she said carefully, "the job shows you something that doesn't fit into the boxes. Doesn't mean you're crazy. Doesn't mean it's supernatural. It means we don't know." A week later, Holly called the station. Not 911, the non-emergency line. She asked for Jace specifically. He took the call in the roll call room, away from the others. Her voice was quieter now. "Officer, I found something." "What?" Jace asked, already bracing. Holly hesitated. "The guestbook. It's not gone. It was tucked behind the lobby ice machine panel, like someone hid it. But when I opened it, it's blank." Jace closed his eyes briefly. "Did you touch it?" "Just the cover," she whispered. "But the pen, officer, the pen was warm, like someone had been holding it." Jace stared at the cinder block wall in front of him, suddenly aware of how many walls existed in the world. How many hidden spaces, how many places sound could travel without being seen. "Close it," he said. "Lock it up, and don't keep it on sight." Holly exhaled shakily. "Okay." After he hung up, Jace sat there longer than he needed to. He wasn't scared of the motel. He was scared of the idea that his movements, his routine, his patterns, his quiet choices could be watched, recorded, and rewritten without leaving a trace. And that fear did what fear always does. It made him smaller, more careful, less willing to take the long way through the dark. Months passed, and Maple Ridge layered new stories over old ones. The motel got new owners. The neon sign was replaced. The frontage road was repaved. People forgot, because most people are allowed to forget. Jace didn't. He never filed for a transfer. He didn't quit. He didn't become a cautionary tale. He just adjusted his life around one small place on the map, the way people do when they learn a certain street makes their chest tighten. He worked his shifts. He kept his reports clean. He became more methodical, more careful about radio traffic, more aware of who could be listening. He started checking his body cam more often, not because he expected to see a ghost, but because he needed proof of his own reality. Ruiz kept an eye on him without hovering. Sometimes she'd casually take the call that would route them near that exit. Sometimes she'd change the subject when she saw his jaw clench. She never forced him to talk about room 12 like it was a joke.
One night, long after the motel stopped being news, dispatch got a routine call. Noise complaint. Possible arguing. Motel on the frontage road. Not the Budget Inn. The new name. New owners. Ruiz was closer, so she took it. Jace stayed back, covering another zone. He told himself he was relieved. Then Ruiz radioed him 10 minutes later.
Unit 12, she said, voice steady. You there?
Go ahead, Jace answered, trying to sound normal. Ruiz paused. Just a fraction. I'm at the motel. Same exit. Different building. Same lot. Staff says guests are complaining about knocking in the walls. Jace's throat tightened. What room?
Ruiz exhaled quietly.
They're calling it room 12. Jace's hands went cold on the steering wheel.
Ruiz continued, voice careful.
I'm not saying it's the same thing. I'm saying the pattern repeats.
Jace swallowed.
He could choose to ignore it, let someone else handle it forever. He could choose to let fear become policy. Or he could do the job. He didn't speed. He didn't panic. He just turned his cruiser toward the frontage road, the way he'd done 100 times before, and said into the radio, "Copy. I'm en route as backup." When he arrived, the motel looked different. New paint, brighter lighting, different sign. But the air felt the same. That strange stillness that made normal sounds, footsteps, keys, breathing, feel louder. They walked the hallway together. Ruiz kept her posture calm. Jace kept his flashlight steady. Room 12's door was shut. No knocking, no TV flicker, just silence. Ruiz knocked once, firm. Police department. A pause. Then, from somewhere behind the drywall, a faint tap answered back. One single knock. Jace and Ruiz looked at each other. Ruiz's voice stayed professional. "Maintenance issue," she said, loud enough for the staff to hear. "We'll advise management to inspect for loose pipes or animals in the walls." Jace nodded, playing his part. Procedure, calm, no spectacle. They cleared the call, returned to their cruisers, and drove away. And for the first time since that night, months ago, Jace felt something loosen in his chest. Not because the mystery was solved, but because he'd stopped letting it steer him. Whatever room 12 was, it didn't get to decide where he drove. Not anymore. If you were Officer Moreno, would you have written it off as a prank and moved on? Or would you keep digging, even if it made you feel watched? At what point does a weird call become something you can't ignore? And if a place on your route started changing the way you think, would you avoid it or face it just to prove you still can?